Okay, we're live with our next episode of the SDN Cast. We do it in English today. It's number 102, 12th of July. It's 2080. And today it's Maarten van Stam, Fanie Reynders, and we have a special guest, Gareth Baars. Sounds very Dutch, the name, but he will explain in a minute. So let's start with the show.
Not sure what happened there. All right.
I see.
Hi, good day.
Twice now.
I see two Gareths.
All right. I think that for some reason, my thing just dropped. I'm just going to ignore myself on the other side.
It's quite weird to have two Gareths, like the twins. We're interviewing two Gareth twins here.
We're trying to go for the blooper reel because every show
How's that?
wrong.
Literally 40 seconds to go, and it kills my internet. So I don't have there. I've just switched it to my phone.
Block you? Do you want to block Gareth Baars as well?
All right. Cool.
I think so.
All right. You guys reading me right?
I believe you have a bad internet connection. Or is it my side? I don't know if it's my side.
I think it's your side.
Okay. Then it's cool. If it's my side, that's fine.
Yeah.
So okay, we
Gareth Baars from South Africa, I think. Can you?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, sure. So as you know, my name is Gareth Baars. I'm from South Africa. I've worked as a consultant, as an architect, as a CTO, and I'm currently heading up a little startup that we started in South Africa out here in Europe called Intent Architect.
Oh, cool. I see your image is a lot blurrier than just 5 minutes ago. Because I'd be tempted to switch. Maybe it's okay if you just log off and just re-enter the show again. And
all right, yeah. Let me try.
In the meantime, we do the news.
Yes, we can go to the news.
Yeah.
Perfect.
See you in a moment.
Okay, I'll see you guys in a moment.
That's the one. That's another blooper reel.
It's like always. So, what news were there?
Yeah, we have some hot news, hot of the press. Very hot news. Announcing the TypeScript 3.0 release candidate just announced a couple of seconds ago. I just noticed it was on Twitter and just in time for a show. And I haven't had time to look at it, but it's available. So just go over there and download it. I'd say. The other thing is they introduced the Microsoft Azure for Students starter offer. Obviously, Microsoft wants to put some more effort into the students and get them into their program for basically for free. To start for free, where you don't need a credit card anymore to start with.
Surely would need a limit. There's some kind of limit.
There is a limit. I think it's and it's not that extremely high. I think you get $100 credit. I'm not sure if that's a month or a one time. I should think it's a monthly credit, but I'm not sure about it. At least you can do it without the credit card. No credit card needed. And you can use 25 free products, 25 or more, like the cognitive services, etc. And now Fanie also left the show. And Gareth's back.
Hi, I'm back. Is that better?
Yeah, I think so. Let's see. It's a bit better, I think, but now you're hanging again. So it must be the internet connection, I think. In the meantime, I go through with the news. I think you, frozen again. As is Fanie. There's an eBook. Was announced this week. eBook NET Microservices architecture for containerized .NET applications. I think you both should reconnect again. Just as a side note. You can download it from from GitHub. It's on the github.com.net-architecture/news-issues/21. And well, you can get it from there. We will put a link into the show notes again, so you can find it there. And let's see what's over here. The MVP award categories have been changed July the 10th.
I don't even know what the details are. Sorry, I just disappeared for 1 second.
No, your
I'm gonna.
screen is gone, and Gareth is frozen.
Gareth frozen. I thought he was just staring in in despair. You know.
Must have been having some internet issues, I think.
Okay, he is probably on hotel Wi-Fi. I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
So
Bad, yeah.
So it might be going and coming again because there's some we've been building here, and we've got some issues with the door upstairs with my boy. Now he's always trying to open the door. So I'm going to be constantly going to make sure he's in his bed again. Otherwise, he's not gonna sleep.
Yes, you put him on the show.
Yeah, one day I will. Have a little Peppa Pig running.
So your MVP category changed this week, July the 10th.
Yeah, that's
you're now developer technologies.
Developer technologies, yes.
Let's put it in screen. And that was not the only one. The other one was, I think, the Office, Office services, servers and services that changed into Office apps and services. And the thing that changed over there is that they put the applications like Excel, Word, and Outlook, and the lot. They put them all in the same category. So they mixed and matched everything related to Office into the Office apps and services. But there's still the Office development MVP thing where I'm part of. That didn't change too much. That was what you noticed there. There were a big list of separate apps for Word and Excel and whatever in there, but they all mixed that into WXP development. So that was a bit, a small change. And the business applications did get a bit of a change. I think they also added Power Apps and Flow in there. And Garrett's looking a lot better right now.
All right, let's see if it holds up.
Yeah, it's looking basically looking the same as that we started to test it.
Yeah, I think there's something with this router in this apartment.
Yeah.
I will see.
Announcing the public preview of the Azure Dev Spaces, whatever that may be. Do you know what it is, Fanie?
Well, that's that. According to me, that's that way of running a specific environment for yourself. Like it's like creating a new Kubernetes cluster of production, for instance, and then have it like fanie.foo.com, and it will allow you to what do you call it, debug that session.
It is Kubernetes related, at least, so AKS.
So according to me, in Visual Studio, you can now you can spawn off a dev space from a certain environment, and you can give someone a link, and it will actually commission that link.
Yeah, and your boy is out of bed again, I think. Another announcement today, on July the 9th, actually, is announcing the ML.NET 0.3. There's machine learning.net, and that was introduced also last week. And then we had the leak of by Tom Hardware. They actually showed the Microsoft Surface Go, the smaller device with the it's a little bigger than a tablet. I think it's 10-inch, I believe. Yes, it's 10-inch, and but it's very portable. And if you look at the video, I think I have the video also here somewhere. Let's see if I can put that up somehow. Overview. it's not already available over here. It's this probably the video somewhere. I'm not sure. We've been watching the video a couple of minutes ago, but lost it now. So if you want to order it, you have to wait, I think, until August 27. It's in the Netherlands, and it's depending on what kind of machine you're ordering. If you want a different one, and you used to be able to change it, but it's not possible. Oh, you can opt for 2 devices for 94. What's it? 94. So or for the bigger one around 600 euros. But you have to keep in mind that you need to buy the keyboard as well, and the keyboard is still, I think, over 100 euros. So if compared to the small device, it's relatively expensive. So it's 25% of the original price if you take the lower priced device. So yeah, and I think you should buy it with a keyboard. So what's this? Blah blah blah. Crazy message. So that was quite a surprise, and yeah, well, Tom Hardware he spilled the beans, and they just released the article, while it still was under embargo, and it was removed in a couple of minutes, but someone was able to take it from the cache on Google and put it on Twitter, and whenever it's on Twitter, you're done and over and out. Then we also had this week ReSharper Ultimate 2018.1.3 and Rider 2018.1.3 released these days, and some additional tooling. Do you use Rider or something like that? ReSharper?
Yeah, I use ReSharper.
Okay. It's a very popular tool, and we discussed this more often a couple of shows a couple of weeks ago. You might question if people still use it, because a lot of the tooling is currently available in Visual Studio itself, and they have to come up each time with new features to get ahead of Visual Studio. It's just copying their features and putting it in the box.
No, I'm a big fan. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I used the other one from Dev Express. What's it called? Code Rush.
Okay. Yeah, I've never used it.
But in fact, I stopped using it because I was so many times installing new machines and virtual machines and whatever. And so each time you also had to reinstall the tools that come with it. And so in the end, I decided to stop with it, despite of all the benefits that you basically have with it, because it's very useful.
The only criticism I have of ReSharper is it quite visibly slows your machine down.
Yes, that's another downside, I think.
But the enhancement it gives you is worth it. So I think particularly in 2017, Visual Studio 2017, you see it a lot. It's worse. 2015 seemed to be a bit quicker.
Yeah, and especially the latest release from Visual Studio, they all had a very big improvement in performance. So yeah, it's getting better, I think, and. I also believe that ReSharper is using their own engine. Is it, or did they and moved it back to the to Roslyn in the end?
I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure whether they're using Roslyn or they've got their own thing going.
I think they started with their own engine, and in the end decided to go over to Roslyn, just as everyone else did. Then we let's go over some more events that we have coming out in the next couple of weeks. Let's see. Well, we can notice that there's summertime coming up, so there's not that much. We have the Inspire event. That's basically the Microsoft the Microsoft Partner event is very big. I heard there will 120,000 people over there, and that's really very big. And this time they do it a little bit different because they integrated it with the Tech Ready shows from Microsoft internally. Do you know what the Tech Ready things are?
Well, I said no, I haven't. I'm not
Microsoft
familiar with that.
is doing, I think, a couple of times a year. They organize these internal shows where each team can display what they are doing and where they are working on, and that's an internal thing only. They used to do that on campus, but this time they apparently they decided to integrate it with the Microsoft Inspire, the partner event. So this time were no journalists. There was no press invited because of this, because there was a lot of NDA stuff, not for their eyes, apparently.
Is it like NDA Microsoft type of MVP kind of NDAs, or is it a bit?
It's even higher than that.
A bit beyond that.
We don't get to see everything. But Tech Ready is basically only meant for internal use, and not everything will be seen published in the end. Some things will be dropped, and other things will make it in the end product. But it's very experimental, I believe. It's a bit like what Microsoft Research is doing. So they just can show what they do. Then we have we only will mention a couple of events this time. Let's click the Edge row away. Microsoft Business Applications Summit is July 22, 24, 2018. And Cloud Next, 24th of July. We all discussed this last week as well because nothing changed in between. And we have the Open Source Summit. And that's in August, already the end of August. So that's basically in 6 weeks. I think 6 weeks or so.
Can you believe it? Almost the end of the middle of the year.
Yeah, we're approaching the new year again. So we start to bake oliebollen and more of this.
Do you know what oliebollen is, Gareth?
No, what's that?
It's a kind of a vetkoek. Yeah, like we know it's Africa. It's a vetkoek, but it's kind of a vetkoek with like raisins in there, and you eat it with like caster sugar.
Okay.
Is it caster sugar? It's like strooisuiker. It's like this white powder sugar. Sorry, not caster sugar, powder sugar.
Yeah. I forget what it's called, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So that's oliebol. It's quite a Dutch thing.
All right. I'll definitely need to try some while I'm here.
Extremely greasy and a lot of oil in it, and so
it doesn't sound very healthy, but it looks really good.
Just unlike a
tradition, and we do it only with the new year.
Yeah, but just unlike the vetkoek, like a vetkoek we know in South Africa has mince inside, mince and cheese and stuff like that. There's no mince and cheese in there. But
yeah, it's more
you have these variations on it with apple and whatever you put in there. So you also have without raisins. It's just plain dough. And,
yeah.
They also call it the Dutch donut sometimes.
The Dutch donut.
You don't see it because I don't see the resemblance of a donut, but
they're not supposed to have a hole inside.
Yeah, well, you can make a hole inside with your finger or something. That's very greasy. Okay, well, that's a part for the news and the events, and not too much. You can notice that the summer is coming on, and it's slowing. Things are slowing down. Well, you're back on screen now, and I think your camera is showing a lot better than when we started.
Yeah, let's hope it stays that way.
It was okay when we test driving.
Yeah, I look at it. Somehow the router just went down. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's a shared router. Maybe there's a problem with the router. I'm not sure.
But sometimes it's related to Hangouts because they are sometimes a bit.
I lost complete internet connection. I had to go reset the router and then see if I can get myself back up.
Okay, so you're back up again, and I think we should make use of this time because we don't know what will happen in the future. So, Gareth, you have, just to quickly back up, you have a product that you built. Tell us more about that product and what does it do? What is it intent?
All right, so okay, so the product's name is Intent Architect. Fundamentally, it's something we've been working on for a long time. We've seen very similar ideas. In my career, I've seen a lot of these kind of ideas, and I've really enjoyed them. A lot of them revolve around MDA, so model-driven architecture, model-driven engineering, model-driven development, and a lot of code automation. So that's our website. And fundamentally, there's two real principles that revolve around this. The first is the idea of what we call code management. So I've mentioned that this is a code automation platform, and the way we achieve this code automation is through what we call code management. Most people are very familiar with code generation in two forms. There's the on the one side, you've got this continuous generation where people will take a T4 template, for example, and they will punch in some metadata from somewhere, maybe an XML file or a JSON file, and they will output code. And there's a couple of advantages to this. Of course, all that code that this thing outputs into your code base is taking care of things for you, and it could be quite elaborate, and you don't have to actually manage that code. You're just simply managing the template. But this is also where a lot of the hatred for code generation is sourced, and that's because 95% of the time this works great, but 5% of the time, or even 1% of the time, you have to customize. It's just not meeting your needs, and if you go in there and you start messing with that file, it's just going to overwrite that file. And I think that that's the one side of it. It's also oftentimes guys do a little bit wrong, and they end up with these enormous files that are not readable and are very challenging. Sometimes they'll even bomb your Visual Studio to try open up the actual code. So there's a lot of things that are that can be very, very painful if it's not done right on the continual generation side. Then the other type of code generation everyone's very familiar with is like scaffolding. And scaffolding is, if you, for example, Microsoft provides a lot of it. They'll say, okay, you want to start a new ASP.NET core web project. It'll scaffold out some code for you. You could ask for a controller. It'll scaffold that out for you. You could even maybe, I think some of the more advanced scaffolding cases, you could point to an entity framework object, and you could scaffold out something that's basically CRUD related on that front. And it's very useful. It's definitely got its place. I'm a huge fan of scaffolding. And I think what we've basically put in the mix is we've taken all the pain out of code generation, but we've managed to keep the whole continuous side as well as the ability to customize all in one package. And we're using Roslyn to achieve this in the .NET space, and we're using tag stuff in other languages. But we're basically using Roslyn to inspect what we call the software factory or software engine wants to output into your code base against what's actually there, and then we're combining the two together to give quite based on an intelligent rule set to define what's going to actually come out.
Okay, so you have code generation on the one side, you have templating on the other side, and the intent factory or intent architect, that's the name of the thing. It's in the middle of these two worlds, right?
Yes, it's basically bringing the best of both sides together. So it's the customizability, the ability, scaffolding, you can customize it the way you want. Whereas the continual generation, you don't have to manage that code. So it brings basically the best of both worlds. And in a lot of ways, we feel like we've actually solved the pain of code generation. So yeah, that's kind of one of the main concepts. The other idea behind this tool is basically the idea of packaging up patterns that you can reuse across projects. So in the same way, and we've actually modeled it around NuGet. So a lot of users are very, .NET guys are very familiar with NuGet, and NuGet is the ability to package up code and reuse it across different projects. And what we're providing is a different kind of idea, but it's a similar concept, and it's packaging up patterns that you could reuse across different projects. So a pattern would be, for example, how you map your entity framework objects, or another pattern would be how do you describe your controllers for a .NET Core web API service.
Right. So instead of now a new employee joining a new company, instead of learning how to code in their specific coding methods, how they do it, they're supposed to follow a pattern. Now they can actually just implement this pattern and teach the people on that pattern, not necessarily the code.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, if you got your, for example, within a company, you got your best service architect to put together the patterns for a distributed service that with, let's say it does caching, it's got good security and all these kind of things. You typically tell the developers on the team, here's an example of how this works. I need you to copy this example.
Like a reference architecture, basically.
It's basically like a reference architecture. And what tends to happen is, I think this is obviously it's good, but the guys tend to just copy this, paste it, and then they make a lot of mistakes because they don't understand necessarily all the nuances of it. It doesn't. What we're saying from intent's perspective, we're not saying people now don't need to understand. So let's say that this top service architect put together this pattern. It doesn't mean the developers on the team should now forget that they need to understand how this works. You still need to understand how it works, but the pattern will be rolled out for you. So it's kind of the mundane trench digging boilerplate that's required in order to make these technologies work together is just automated for you.
Right. So the code you would have written when you would have done it by hand, by this pattern to abide by this pattern, is now generated. Yeah.
I mean, another way to think about it is, I know personally, I think my employers of the past would freak out if they heard this webcast, but I've personally got every single code base that I've ever worked on in a little stash somewhere. And if ever I think, this is a problem, we've solved this problem before, let me go find that in that code base and I'll go hop in there and I'll look for it. So, in a sense, we're just kind of formalizing that idea. So, this is a pattern, you come up with it, you package it up. We personally, as part of the intent team, a couple of other architects in South Africa, we build a lot of these patterns using T4 templating into the modules, and you can then roll this out wherever you want on any project. And in terms of productivity, and in terms of just getting, as a developer, having the opportunity to focus on actual real problems, not just how do I copy paste this code and rename all the things correctly. You're getting a lot more done at a much quicker pace, and it's a lot better quality that comes out of that too.
Okay, so that's the marketing side of things now.
Yeah, marketing, blah blah blah.
So now let's actually see something in practice. Do you have something to show us?
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna just throw over my screencast. What I'm gonna do is, all right, share. Okay, you should be able to see my screen there. Okay, that's you. All right, so just before I start the demo, so I just want to be clear that this demo is something that anybody can do from home. What we're just going to be going through some of the more basic use cases that Intent Architect can achieve. We have built some pretty large systems with it. So if I go to the website, intentarchitect.com, if you wanted to download the latest version, there's a download now. You can just click that, it'll start downloading. And you'll need an account, so you can just punch in your email address, your first name. It's all for free. There is a paid version, but that would be something that you'd only run into once you're building a large enterprise system. And so one can basically sign up and follow the demo at home if they'd like to.
Okay, so wait, there are two things here. There are the tooling, and then there's the actual modules that are open source.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So to actually installing the tool, this is you can download the tool over here, and you'll need an account. So you'll just need to sign in. We'll sign up and then sign in into the tool, not into the website. And then, of course, this particular repository over here is our intent modules, and that can be found. It's our GitHub /intent software inside of here, Intent Architect. This is our framework, and this is all open source, and you can see how we've achieved all of the modules. So one of the key things that I think, one of the things I want to emphasize is that the modules is something that guys can create themselves. And in fact, it's something we encourage. These are just modules that we've created, which we've used on projects in the past. All right, so let me start firing it up. Intent.
So I assume this is an Electron app you told me in the past, so which means it will run then cross-plat?
No, at the moment it doesn't support cross-plat because our actual engine is .NET, so we're using a technology called Electron Edge to communicate between the node process and the Electron, and the .NET space. And but this is something with .NET Core we'll be able to support both very soon.
Is the constraint? Sorry to interrupt. Is the constraint the T4 generation?
No. So the T4 generation, because it's packaged up, it's just DLLs. It's really just the it's the .NET Core. Basically the Edge Electron Edge doesn't support .NET Core yet, so we're just waiting for that.
Cool.
T4 is supported in .NET Core, so that's all fine. All right, so I'm just going to run through this from the beginning. We're going to create an application. For lack of creativity, I'm just going to call it My Solution. So this is for the company. I'm going to put in my favorite development location, which would be C dev. Let's call it My Solution.
I thought it will be C users Gareth Baars /
All right,
repos.
Okay, so one of the ideas here is that we out the box we've built some microservices architectures with this. So under your solution would be all your different microservices, and each microservice would say be an application. You could also just create a single application, which would be monolithic. I could say add new, and it's giving me a couple of options here. We call these application templates for how an application could be created. And this is just like a shortcut. Instead of having to install the modules yourself and set up the configuration, this is just a shortcut, and it's something that you could build yourself too. This is something we've got. These are all open source as well. So I'm going to say I want to build a full stack ASP.NET Core web application. Gives me a little bit of information about what it's using. We're going to be using Entity Framework. We've got a repository pattern in the mix, of course, the standard dependency injection, and a little bit of a lazy dispatch pattern around the service calls, just so that we don't have to load everything up into memory.
So wait, here's the summary of showing you all the frameworks that's going to be using, and also the patterns that's going to be using, which means
Yes.
you would need those frameworks installed.
Well, it will install all of these for you. The one dependency that you've got for this particular application template is running on .NET Core 2.1.
Okay.
So you'd have to have it installed as the SDK installed for your machine in order to make this work.
Okay.
So I've worked on a big hotel management system, and I think this is the same theme I demoed to you the other day, Fanie. So we're going to call this app Hotelio for our hotel management system. I can say create.
Would you need Visual Studio for this or not?
Yes. Well, this is a .NET. You don't need to use Visual Studio. The same for running it in .NET. But you could use the JetBrains IDE. But this is a .NET C# project fundamentally. Okay. So I will be using Visual Studio 2017 for it. But you could use any IDE. Yeah. So basically, if we just look here, this is what it's installed. These are the different modules. So these are the patterns that we've packaged up. A lot of these work together. So you'll see sometimes we've got this term called interop. This basically allows Entity Framework to work with our Web API core, which is installed over here. Okay. So just to give a rundown before I show how the code comes out, if I give a rundown of what this application template involves, the first is there's a bit of configuration. What this is it's a system we use to target your CS proj files or folders if you were in a different language, or anything that is basically supported you could target. And here we're going to basically say, well, these are Visual Studio projects or CS proj files. If they don't exist, we've got a module installed called Visual Studio Projects, and it'll create them if they don't exist. Otherwise, if they do exist already, it will just target the code towards that. So we use this concept called roles. So the modules are aware of the role, and now your project is aware of the role. And now by moving these roles around, we could put code into different spots within an application. Okay, so that's the configuration side. Of course, if we wanted to add a new project, you could just say add new project. These are the projects that come with our Visual Studio module that basically comes out the box.
Just for my understanding now, that's just a metadata. That's not actually creating a new project now. So when you create a new project, so that's just putting the metadata of your wannabe project. Exactly.
Okay. So I mean, right now, if I quickly just navigate to cdev, you'll see that there is a My Solution, and he's got some stuff in here, intent, metadata, intent modules, and there's Hotelio, but there's not much in here right now. There's just intent.metadata, a little bit about the application, and what modules have been installed. So these files go into your version control. They're not separate from your version control. In fact, a lot of this information must go into version control for you to manage it between different developers all working on the same project.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so the next side of it is this is modeled around NuGet. We actually are trying to avoid some of the pain of NuGet. It doesn't have every single feature that NuGet does, but these would be the modules that we have available for install or installation. And basically you can see the little tick on the right here. It basically says it's installed, or I could just click on the installed on the right over there. And this is just showing us what version we've installed and so on and so forth. Of course, very similar to NuGet, you've got a list of what the previous versions were. So we're just running the latest ones at the moment. And yeah, so that's basically a rundown of what gets set up when you say, I want this .NET Core application. Of course, if someone wanted to write their own application template with their own set of modules, that's totally possible. And all the stuff is open source, so they'll be able to see how we've done it so that they can do it themselves.
So in this step, you're basically designing your solution and you're setting it up how you want it to be.
Exactly. So it's come out the box for us. We could also have built this up step by step, gone to the configuration, added projects ourselves, so on and so forth. So, if we wanted another core application here, you could just give it, so I'm just going to type some rubbish in there and say create, and it's just going to add it in there for us. So we could have built this up ourselves too. Okay, so that's just a high level of what comes out the box when you install this application template. We start the software engine or software factory by clicking play over here. And what he's gone and done is he's gone and ripped up a application stack for us. So we've got, you can see there's the CS proj files. We've got program.cs, startup.cs. So these are things that should be quite familiar to someone who is used to starting up a ASP.NET Core web application. There's the DB context. If I click on any of these, it's using Microsoft's, it's using the Visual Studio diff tool, but you could plug in whatever diff tool you'd like under the settings, which is basically under your user over there.
So that now shows us the staging. It's now staging the changes, what it will do, right? So
yes.
Now in this case, obviously, it will create this code. You can completely see what's
Absolutely.
going on.
So you can see here, there's no code that's being created. It's just staged it for us, said to us, are you happy with what I want to do? If we take a look at a CS proj file, you can see it's using the new .NET Core 2 format. And I think, basically, if we looked at the program, it's a standard program. Everything's very, very standard out the box. Okay, so if I say apply changes, what he's gone and done is he's actually going to put the code for us there. So now this folder is full of everything. And we can double click on this the solution. And we're just going to have to give Visual Studio a few minutes. Well, let's hope not a few minutes, but a few seconds just to get everything handled. All right, so one of the key ideas that we incorporate when we build our modules is that we want the code to look like a human wrote it. So that if, for example, you were to stop running the software factory, you wouldn't need to, or if you've decided to, turn intent off and you don't feel like using it anymore, the code is in a manageable state, which is something that a lot of code generation systems do not achieve.
You should actually put in like a feature that creates like some Easter egg comments.
Yeah. So you can do that. You could, as code is basically outputted, you can intercept that code. There's quite advanced systems that we've built into the modules that you can basically hook in, and you can change the way things work, and you can alter how files actually coming out regardless of what the template said. And that's actually how the Roslyn works. It's almost like an interception on the outputs. Okay, so I just want to run through this file a little bit. Okay, so basically this is when you see these tags or these attributes are basically telling the weaving system, the Roslyn weaving system, how to interact with this file.
Okay.
At the top here, we've said, okay, this file here is fully by default. And what fully means is that it's managed, it's on full Cogeneration, which means it's managed by intent. Okay, it's not user managed. But we've also said that now this class, so it almost works at a granular level. We've said overarchingly, everything is fully managed, but at a granular level, this class is on a merge. And what merge means is that it's an additive system. So if I add some code, if I add a new method or a property, he'll leave it there. If I go to my module and I go to the templates, we're using T4 for this. If I go to the T4 and I say, I'd like to add another method, it'll add it for us. So it's very additive. But because we've said here that this is under fully managed, the individual methods within this file by default would be fully managed, okay, all within this class. But if we want to manage it ourselves, all we do is we throw this little ignore on top.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to just demo out here. So because this is ignored, this code here, if it was code, I mean, I can basically make this a console, right? This code here is under my management.
Wait, let's do something better. Let's go to just to show it's not scripted here.
Yeah, sure.
So let's go to the program CS file.
Yep, 100%.
That's also managed, right? So
this one is fully managed. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now I want you to let's say, for instance, now we want our public static build web host function to be done by ourselves, right? So
Yeah.
So then I would do managed or
Yes,
ignore. I
exactly.
should do ignore there, right?
So yes, exactly. What we need to do is we need to tell it. So let's actually just try that straight. There's a little doubt in the back of my head whether I need to put a merge on top of this class file, but let's just go for it straight up. Okay, so I'm going to say intent managed mode dot.
What will happen if you say mode.merged on top there on the file?
On top of this file here or over there?
Over there.
It'll just be additive throughout. So everything.
Okay.
So everything will merge basically.
Okay. So now I want you to take out that .use startup t, and you just move the startup t. This is 2.1, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you just remove that line completely.
Yep.
And then
yeah.
the create default builder has overload that I've contributed to. Now, if you just go back to the function create default builder, it's going to overload to pass in a type of t. See?
Yeah.
That is my function I've contributed to the .NET framework, so better use it.
So he doesn't seem happy with that.
And you need to pass in the args.
Okay. There we go.
There we go.
Cool. All right. So if we now run this, well, I think first off, before we run this, let's take that away. Okay.
Okay.
And if we ran it, we see a change, and what he's doing is he's saying, I'd like to bring it back to what it was.
Yeah.
Okay. We just say cancel, which means he's not going to actually do anything. And if we add it back, let's see what he does. Okay, so he doesn't want to change anything. So it's very happy for us to continue on our own little mission. It's also a good way to say, if, for example, intent is, if he's getting in your way, all you need to do is just add this ignore to the top of the method or the class or whatever that you're dealing with. And this is basically how you can step out of the code generation and customize where you need to.
Okay.
So yeah. All right, cool.
Is there some way of ignoring on convention?
Yes, you could tell it to ignore at this level, and then you could tell it to be fully
turn it around.
Yeah, you could turn things around.
No, but what I mean is I would like it to be ignoring everything that starts with in the namespace mysolution.detailio.distribution, for instance, or .custom or whatever.
Oh, yeah. So no, we don't support anything like that at this point. I think, if guys felt that was something, the actual ignore systems can be quite elaborate. So what I'll do is a little bit later on not the ignore systems, but the merging systems and how this whole thing works together can be quite elaborate. You can, for example, tell it, I want you to manage my signature of this method, but not the body.
Okay.
So there's actually quite intricate things that you can do. I think what we're showing here is just a very simple example of what's possible.
Yes. Okay.
All right, so that's just to really to showcase the rosin weaving.
But nothing changed now.
Yep, sure. So nothing will change because that ignores there. If I take the ignore out, he's going to
change it back to what it was.
He's going to change it back to what it was.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So he's basically, if we throw the ignore in, he leaves us alone, and we can go and customize this method as far as we want. If we take it out, he's going to take over again.
Yes. Okay.
So that can be very useful. So, for example, let's say that you were writing your own module and you realize that actually this particular, there's a use case we haven't thought of. You could go in and you could ignore it, and you could get the job done. And then when you have a moment, you'll go and update your module and update to cater for this, so that you could maybe describe some extra metadata around it, and then set it back to fully, and it'll take over from there. In which case, it's not code that you have to manage, which is very useful.
Cool, man. It's interesting.
I have a question from a viewer.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding correctly, this tool is able to create standard type projects, so I don't have to do boilerplating? ?
Yes, absolutely. So the whole idea is that anything that you want to automate, or anything that you can conceive that can be automated, is something that you could make into a module and you could output into your code base. So you could cut down your boilerplate, by 80%, 90%.
Yeah, is it possible to customize the project solution template easily? So if I'm working at a customer with specific project solution setup, I'll be able to modify the template and make sure it's
Yes.
the way the customer likes the project setup.
Absolutely, absolutely. So all of the modules that you're seeing here, all of the code that's coming out, these are all open source. So if, for example, you were at a client and this was something that, the client wanted something very particular, and let's say that it was just a little different to what we've done, you could fork what we've done, alter it the way you want to, and roll that out into your client's environment. Alternatively, you could write the whole module from scratch exactly how you want it. The modules are completely under your control. So
could you have like a private repository for your modules?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So right now, all the modules that we're looking at come from the website.
Ah, okay. So it's an endpoint.
But if you wanted to, I could add local. Okay, so I've got a repository here which is built out of the modules. If I went into dev, this is the modules. So this is the open source repo, and I went into modules. Once you compile it, this repository, once you compile it or the solution, it outputs all of the different modules as iMods into this folder. And I can just copy paste this. Is good. Sorry, I just exited there. This folder could be a network drive too. So you could, if you've got a team, one of you would set this up. You create your module. Once you're happy with it, you'll upload it into into a network drive. So we could say save over here, and if I wanted to look into this local, I could basically look into the local over here, and this would give us everything that's in the local repository, which is very, very similar.
Cool. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, but I think one thing you will notice is that earlier you saw that there was all the different versions for the Visual Studio projects on the web. There's only one version in here because I don't have them all compiled. If I switch back, you'll see that the whole lot of them are there, just so that you can see that it is actually. Oh, let's just quickly reload it.
Yeah, so another question.
There you go.
Tuned in a bit late, but it looks like an online tool. Can I run it on-prem on the local server on my local machines on each dev machine?
Oh, this tool is to be run on your dev machine, same as Visual Studio. So down at the bottom here, it's actually running. It's an Electron application. It's not a website.
Yeah. Okay.
If that answers that question. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start going into some more. Right now all we've done is we said we want a server. Let's go and describe the server. Okay, so in intent, we offer two DSLs, as we call them, or designers. And the first is a UML editor, which is typically used for the domain. And we've got a services editor, which is typically used for services. So if I add a new class here, so of course we're building a hotel system. So I'm going to go and say this is called hotel. And I'm going to go and add, what does hotel have? He's got rooms. I can go and add a room.
And rooms.
Yeah, so we need to say that this hotel has many rooms, so each room must belong to a hotel, so it's a compositional relationship. And we can put a little star over there. We can even name this relationship to rooms. Okay. And we need to give maybe a couple of attributes. So this is a UML editor that we've built. What's different about this, one could plug in any UML editor as long as you write a module which interprets the output that editor brings. But one of the reasons that we decided to build our own one is because most UML editors don't do very well with version control. And we needed something that worked well with version control and that was easy to use. A lot of the UML editors out there are incredibly painful. So I've just added a few attributes. Yeah.
So the one that's built into Visual Studio is but that's more like a class diagram, right? The the DGML format.
Yeah. So basically, when we looked at a lot of the editors, and I can't say that we looked at. I think we brushed over the Visual Studio one, and it got quite quickly disqualified because it doesn't support very advanced stereotyping systems, which is our extension points. Yeah. Okay. Because describing classes is one thing, but sometimes you want to say, well, this class is actually an aggregate root.
Yes.
And if you were building DDD, for example, so you'd want to describe a little bit more. So we needed systems for extensions, and then typically those are called stereotypes. So we call them stereotypes. And I'll try, if we've got time, I'll try to showcase that. But there's not a lot of time. All right. So let's just quickly run through this name. We've got name, address. We've got maybe number of stars. We'll make that an int. And we've got maybe the owner. Then under rooms, we've got a room number and a room type. So let's give here a number. which is an integer 2, although if I was really writing a program for a hotel, I would not make it an integer. And let's say room type, which you would typically make an enum, but in this case, just for simplicity, let's make it a string. So we can save that, but we also want to interact with this domain. So as part of this, I'm going to create some services. And let's call this service, let's call it hotels. We'll add an operation here called add. We're adding a new hotel, and let's just do a little find all hotels, just so that we can save some hotels to the database and find them all afterwards. Now, of course, we need to pass in some kind of a contract to the add. So I'm going to create a hotel create DTO, data transfer object. And this is a little trick that Intent allows you to do. I can point it through a mapping system at the hotel, tell it I'm done, and he goes and creates me all of the properties and attributes that I would need. But because this is an inbound DTO, I'm going to switch the mapping off. I don't actually want metadata around that this is a map DTO. I just wanted it to help me create the object. And then for the find all, let's get the hotel details, the DTO. And this is an outbound DTO, so I'm very happy to map it. Now, the mapping metadata, which if we've got time, I'll show you, but the mapping metadata is very useful if you want to use AutoMapper, for example, to create mappings between your domain objects and your DTOs that are outbound. So this metadata here can be used to tell AutoMapper, you please create me a mapping for this DTO.
Is this specifically bound to AutoMapper, or if you have something else?
Well, it depends what module you've built. We've built a module for AutoMapper. And you could write your own custom one, which does custom mappings as well. You could do it by hand. There is enough metadata here for you to figure it out. So we want to use the hotel create DTO for the inbound, and for the outbound, we want the hotel details, which I'm going to say is a collection. So you see at a very high level, we're just describing what these services are all about. Okay. So let's run it. So now he's going to do some lifting for us. We've described the basic hotel system, and he's gone and created quite a lot for us here. He's given us some DTOs. He's given us what we call, our pattern is an SCH, which stands for service call handler, which is a lazy dispatch pattern. I can try run through that. There's the controller, which everyone will be very familiar with. Domain objects, so interfaces, iRoom. There's the hotel state. So we separated things out using partial classes. That's just the way we did our pattern. Some in the domain, which is important. We've got the repository interfaces, and we've got specification patterns, which is based on the DDD specification pattern. I think Eric Evans talks about it. You can also look it up by Maarten Fowler. There's the EF mappings. If we clicked on one of these guys, so hotel, that's what the EF mapping would look like. All this stuff is just basically staged. Before we go into this, I just want to show you. So the actual startup file's also been altered, which, as we mentioned, a lot of the stuff is under full management by Intent. So he's helping us out here and just registering up all the DI that is required to make this application work. So let's apply that.
Just to quickly go back, sorry, to that. Oh, too late.
Too late, yeah. The code's now in here now, so I can show you, yeah.
That configure method now, how do you... because in the configure services, the order doesn't matter because of the dependency injection. But of course, in the configure method, where you configure middleware, order matters.
Yes, well, it does depend if you need to resolve the middleware. So this is very basic. If you wanted to do your own thing, I would say probably do your own thing here.
No, I'm talking specifically about the configure method.
This configure. That one there, yeah?
Yes, okay. We actually use the middleware.
Yes.
So that is completely managed, but we do then need to trust that Intent's going to be putting it in the right format, in the right order.
Well, it's not that you need to trust Intent to do it. It's that you need to make sure that your modules do it. So one of the concepts we support with modules is we support, like, for example, the idea of decorating files. And you could maybe build your modules to support priority. So you could use priority systems to ensure things happen after other things. So there's a lot of ways you can achieve it. Intent is not really connected to the files. He's just the platform that allows this to happen. Your actual modules would be the way that you would achieve doing stuff like that.
Right.
And of course, if it's biting you, just put the ignore on, if the modules aren't doing what you want. But the quality of the modules is critical. And, if you're building your own modules, you'd want to, you probably wouldn't make them as advanced as we've made them because ours need to interact. But one can still, take control of those modules and customize it the way you'd like it. Okay, so it's kind of created quite a couple of things. I just want to run through the controller here. So of course, the controller here, I think, Fanie, the other day you were asking me about the transaction scope getting thrown around here. So there's a little transaction scope. This is because oftentimes it's not just entity framework that you are trying to work with. We're also keeping the DB context, or the DB, basically the entity framework, out of the application layer. Okay, so this is an onion architecture, or hexagonal, or ports and adapters. They're all very much the same thing, architecture. And of course, the last thing we want to do is we want to hit the save changes so that the unit of work kicks in, and our concurrency is much better on the server. This whole the transaction scope, as of Entity Framework Core 2.1, the transaction scope is respected, and that means that if you were using some other kind of say messaging system that was saving messages, outbound messages, say through an outbox pattern to the database, that would be part of this transaction. So you can ensure that the messages are only going to be sent if the actual transaction succeeds overall. Okay. Cool. So just quickly running into, so if we were to implement this now, we've got our add SEH. So it's telling us, this thing hasn't been implemented. Please put your implementation here. So I'm going to do a little bit of coding. I'm going to fetch out the iHotel repository. And what's important, that was a little bit too fast, but what's important here is it comes from the domain. Okay, which means that our dependency is not on the infrastructure layer, it's on the domain layer, which is exactly what we want for a onion architecture. And I'm going to create my hotel repository. And all we need to do, because we know that the repository, if we looked at the implementation, you would see it would inject the same DB context that is getting injected to the controller. And that means that we don't need to fire a save off in here. We can just say add. So it's a collection-based repository pattern, if you're familiar with the persistence versus collection-based. Hotel, and we want to fill in a couple of these things here. So name, dto.name. So it's just me having to do what I got to do for the business. Stars and owner, and of course rooms. You'll notice that I'm not setting the ID because rooms, well, actually no, there's nothing coming from the DTO for rooms, so I'm just going to create a new collection. I'm not setting the ID because the way the ID is set as part of our patterns, if you explore a little bit around this, what comes out the code here, is it's using a sequential GUID generator so that you don't get fragmentation in your clustered index as you're saving to the database. I wouldn't want to go and say new GUID here, that's for sure. Okay, so that one's implemented. That's for adding the hotels. Let's go and do the fetching them all back out again.
Why isn't the hotel repository not part of the service call handler? Is that part of the pattern then? You chose not to sort of inject it.
Oh, you mean by default?
Yes.
So because we don't know what you're actually trying to do here, but the thing is that we've actually toyed with the idea of writing a convention-based module, which literally just does all of this for you that I'm doing, because you can see this is something that it's pretty mindless. I've told this thing add, I've done a find all, but of course, someone else could write it too. There's about 1 million modules that we want to write, but there's just a finite amount of time. Anyone else could write this too. So I'm just going to say find all. I'm going to kick into the hotel specification. If you're not familiar with the specification pattern, you could send us a message. We're happy to explain it fully. But there's probably not enough time for us to run through all of it here. So I'm going to just have to, unfortunately, do this manually. So I've got my hotel details DTO.create, and let's just do a little bit of the boilerplate. So you can see that this is definitely something that an automapper or something could do for us. And hopefully I'll have time to show you how that works. I just need to put a return here. Okay. And that's it. Now, of course, I can run the server. He will compile, and I can show you that he will break as soon as we hit any of these service calls. And the reason for that is that we don't have a database. So what I'm going to do is just preempt that, and I'm going to take this. Now, this file here has been with me for about 6 years, although now that with EF Core, this is slightly different. But this file is just something we just output as part of our entity framework pattern. It's just a file we throw out there that's just wired up with some helper commands for entity framework so that we can create the migrations very quickly.
But you can totally do something like entity framework is doing to update a database, like a tool or something. Yeah, you can say update database, and it will run through a kind of a script that was generated.
Yeah, look, I mean, how you know, the thing is, you know, we always say amongst me and my team, you know, your creativity is your biggest obstacle when it comes to using a tool like this. Like, if you could think of it, if you can describe it, you can automate it. So, you know,
That's a good example, actually. If you can describe it, you can automate it. That's right.
I mean, right now we've only described a domain and services, but other things that we've described in other projects is things like pub subsystems for distributed communication between microservices, and it wires it all up with our enterprise service bus, etc. So, you know, it just takes a lot of the pain out of a lot of these things, especially for guys who aren't familiar with the technology. But at the same time, you still have to understand how these technologies work. What I'm doing, I just quickly threw in a command here for the update of the database. He's now going to create the database for us. So this server doesn't have a front end, which means that my front end for the day is going to be Postman. I'm going to compile this guy and run him. So I've just pressed F5 there. And there's our little server up and running. Now let's go get Postman going. Postman. Okay, just copy the server address.
Also an Electron application, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, our VVS Code is an electronic application too.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So I'm just going to go. So API hotels, I believe, and we wanted to do the was it find all, I believe, or was it get all? Anyway, let's just hit that.
That's not really RESTful, but
well, no. So the thing is that your pattern could be linked up to be completely RESTful. So you would go and say you could change it to be 100% RESTful.
Yes.
You know, so that it follows. But REST, I find, is very cruddy. So, you know, if your application is very cruddy, then REST is, you know, going with a conventional REST API tends to work very well. If it's not very cruddy, then it doesn't always work out so well.
That's anyway, resource-based.
Yeah, exactly. So all we've done here is we've received an empty array in a JSON format. Okay, so I'm going to copy this again so that I can use it for the next window. And we're going to have to do a post for this. If you went into the controller, you would see that the post, it's using a convention to work it out, but you could use a stereotype inside of the services description. And maybe if there's time, I'll show you that too, to set. Maybe you want it to be a put or a delete. So I've got an add. We need to put a body in place, raw, make it JSON. And we can have DTO. Oh no, hold on, it's still sticking to text. Let me go JSON, there we go. Okay, and let's see if we can remember all of them. Name. Fanie, what was that hotel that we used last time? It was called the Maslow.
I believe so. Won't you need some quotes around your properties?
No, you don't have to. Not for JSON. It's actually fine. I think as long as you don't have spaces in your properties, you don't need it. Okay. The address would be Santon somewhere. Yeah, this is in Johannesburg. If any of you have been to Johannesburg, stars. I believe this is a 5-star hotel. And the owner, I have no idea. Let's see if I got this DTO right, if I got this construct right. So I'm going to say send. He's happy with it. He gave me a 200. You guys pointed out the other day we should make this a 201. Yes. So we would have to go and upgrade our pattern to make sure it's a 201. But you'd have to describe it at some level. Yeah. So if the other hotel in Santon is called the Radisson, I think it's a 5-star too. So I'll send that. So we got 2 hotels in our system. We can come back to our little get over here, hit it, and voila.
Wow, look, Mom.
Yeah, exactly. So this is just an extremely basic example of how one can use this tool. Of course, you know, you can go a hell of a lot further, but maybe the things that could be quite interesting is, first off, if I wanted to install, we've talked a lot about AutoMapper. If I wanted to install this pattern here or this module here called mappings, this uses AutoMapper, and if I install it, you'll see he's got a little, it's a little green line here that says unassigned role created. So if you think back to the beginning of this demo, we created there was these roles put under CS project files. So it's telling us it created one for us. If I try run the software engine right now, it's going to say, listen, you've got unassigned roles. Would you like to assign them? I can say yes. And it's going to take me back to the configuration. Now we've got this role called application.mappings. Now we could stick this absolutely anywhere. We could stick it in the distribution layer. We could stick it in the application layer. We could put this into, I mean, we could put it in the wrong spot completely and create a cyclic dependency. But where this belongs in terms of the pattern and the way that we've structured things right now is we want to put this into the application.mappings. Okay. So if we run it now, he obviously doesn't give us that warning. And he's gone and created a DTO profile, which is a profile, and he's created a map for us between iHotel and the hotel details DTO, which was our outbound one. He's also gone and created, this is something that I added to the pattern a few months ago, which is just really useful as an extension method for the hotel, as well as for an enumeration of the hotels, or enumerable of the hotels, so that basically you can just say .map to this. And the last thing he's added is he's just put in an initializing of mapper, and he's just said, look, automapper, please initialize with my add profile. You could also then throw a little ignore over this guy, and you're good to go if you wanted to take it over. So we can say apply changes there. And what that's going to allow us to do is, yeah, that's cool. You can update. What that's going to allow us to do is instead of writing this whole thing out, we can just say here, what's going on? Oh, of course, I'm running. Up to hotel details DTOs. So it's picked it up immediately. Cool. Very happy with that. We don't need to construct this DTO anymore. And we can run it.
So that's a cool extension, actually, that you just showed.
Yeah, so let's see. He's not happy about something. Oh, you know what? I've noticed this happen sometimes with Visual Studio. It doesn't refresh this particular project. So all I'm going to do is when this happens, I just say unload the project, reload the project. I think this is a 2017 bug. It never happens. Well, this can't be supported in 2015. Okay, that guy there is happy, and boom, everything's cool now.
Is it maybe not because you're using ReSharper? It's maybe also maybe
it could absolutely be. It could be because of ReSharper. Are you not a fan? I'm a fan. I love ReSharper. I can't do without it. Don't know what I'm doing. All right. So if we run it again, of course, we could just hit the same service. Bam, comes out, no problem.
That is amazing. But what about security?
Okay, so security. So we haven't set up any modules that are official around security. For a previous project, we used Identity Server, and we would link in security using Identity Server, and we actually built modules around that. There's a good possibility that inside of our repository, I think you could probably, so if you look under our repository, you'll come across modules that are unofficial. And we've actually left these lying around, not intentionally. We're actually planning to take them away eventually, but it's worth noting that we've got some in here which, for example, you could plug in. This is using Owen, so this is not used for .NET Core, but this would basically plug in JWT security into your system. And the way that you would get that to work is you'd plug in the JWT security, but you could also then say, well, the ad needs to be secured, okay? And that's basically all that's going to do is if we run that, it's going to change our controller, and it's going to make it from allow anonymous to authorize. Right. Okay. So how you link in your filter over there. But what's really great is as an architect, you can look at your services at this high level and you can see, hold on a second, why is my find all not secure? Or why is this whole service not secure? And so having that high level vision and knowing that this is the truth about your system is very, very useful. So that's a huge win, especially when the system starts getting to hundreds and hundreds of service calls, and you start seeing some weird stuff, and you're like, hold on, what's going on here? And you'll get that almost like a summary of your application at a very, very high level.
Just for interest's sake, just quickly go to that folder now that the code was generated, because I've noticed something very interesting when I did it. Mm-hmm. You have intent-specific code, and then that's almost like a sort of the umbrella. So if you go back to my solution, for instance.
Yep.
There's the intent-specific stuff, and it's ISLN file.
Yes.
And then if you dig deeper, you'll get to the actual Visual Studio solution that was generated. And this whole thing goes in source control, right? Not just the metadata.
Absolutely. So the one thing that you probably wouldn't want to throw into source control is very similar to NuGet packages. You would want to ignore this with your Git, because inside of here is, and you'll see how similar this is to Git. I mean, us as .NET developers, the parts that, familiar to us is like with Git, it's, put in a lib. You don't want to put these DLLs into version control. You would rather, have the actual iMod, the intent modules, the code for that and the versions for that should be under a different repository, or even on the same repository. It's fine, but you would only want to store the code. You wouldn't necessarily want to store these.
And being my own pragmatic self, let's say, for instance, one doesn't like the whole ignore all those include and merge attributes.
Yes.
Let's say I want that to be inferred by some kind of config file. Is it something one could build in easily? Because I'm thinking more like in terms of a editor config, maybe have a intent config file where you determine all your classes signatures, for instance, that you want to be managed, not managed at one place. And number one, that's like more you can have a better overview of everything. But number two, also it keeps the intent code out of the actual code.
Yeah, so I think that basically the only code that's coming from intent would be inside of the modules here. Everything else would fall under metadata. This output file over here is basically like a diff between runs. You know, it's just a diff between runs. If you actually end up with a conflict, sometimes you could end up with a conflict on that. You could just say resolve using his or mine or whatever, it doesn't matter. But yeah, you wouldn't want any of these modules inside of version control, but what you would want in the version control is your metadata. And the reason is that your metadata and, you know, these things, that's describing the application at the high level. So under intent metadata for Utilio, we can go into the domain, we can look in the models, we can go into Utilio, and we can see classes. And these are the two classes that we created. So as you can see, this is the 2 kilobyte one. This must be reservation, or hotel, sorry. So there's hotel. This is the attributes on hotel. And you can see it's a file per class. And this you would definitely want to put under version control because this is describing your application. If you had to revert back to an old branch, you do not want to be dealing with the current model that's in development. You want to be dealing with that branch's model if you were using it. So putting these under version control, I would say, is mandatory. If you didn't, you would be probably just looking for trouble.
So I can do my own little tool that generates, as long as I generate that XML, it will work.
If for example, exactly. So if, for example, you want to use our interpretation systems, but one of the other things about metadata is that you could write your own. So you could come up with your own format to describe whatever you want. You could then use what we call a metadata provider to read those files in. Okay, you'll just have to say, like, within this is the relative location of the files that I'm putting out there. You could read that metadata in, and you could expose it to modules, to your own modules. And that's very, very powerful because that literally means that you could just, whatever you can think of describing, you could write modules to output. So you could describe a pub subsystem, and you could then output the, build modules which output RabbitMQ and quite, with an outbox pattern and everything in between. You could do some really, really powerful stuff. And it's not necessarily out the box with intent. Of course, as we develop, we are trying to hit the most common use cases. We found that between a domain and a domain and services, you can describe a hell of a lot about an application. But it doesn't, there's so much more that you could bring into the mix. Like I said, pub subsystems, etc. Even orchestration workflows, whatever you want to describe. If you can describe it, you can automate it.
Cool. So that was a hell of a lot of awesome stuff you just shown us. Where do one go to file issues and stuff like that on GitHub, and how do one get in contact with you to sort of partner or whatever?
Okay, so first off, just for issues, issues can be sent. If you'd like to send the issue via email, you can send it to support@intentarchitect.com. Alternatively, you could drop an issue into our GitHub over here. These are issues that some of the guys have created for us over time. And we go through these, we answer them. We're quite active over here, and of course we're trying to close them out one by one. Some of them are a lot of them are feature requests actually for some very pie in the sky thing, which could be cool, which we hope to get to eventually. And then just in terms of working with us and that kind of thing, I think getting in touch with us at support or at info at Intent Architect. We're looking to build a community. We're looking for guys who are passionate about what we're doing, and we're here basically to help anyone use this tool and achieve their vision. And
you are in Amsterdam until when?
I'll be in Amsterdam until the sorry, let me actually kill my screencast there. I'll be in Amsterdam until the mid-August.
Okay, so if anyone out there wants you to come and show the product to them in means of an informal demo or something, they could totally hit you up, right?
Absolutely. So my personal email address is gareth.baars, B-A-R-S, @Intent Architect. Otherwise, if it's easier to remember, just throw out a mail to info, and I'll pick that up and I'll get in touch.
You could also tweet us at our Twitter handle, and then we can also forward it to you. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Gareth, thank you very much. It was very cool. Maarten, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, it was a great system. What I really liked was the option to look at your change. So you get a list with everything that's changed. Just jump into it and see what's actually got changed over time.
Yeah.
So if you go back to the days where I believe it's entity framework model first, where you just create this model and you don't have a choice. The code will be generated, kind of a thing, from the T4.
Yeah,
It's actually very cool to have a preview of what will change. Are you?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Look, I mean, one of the things that one of the huge.
just override everything.
Sorry, I think we interrupted each other there.
Yeah, I was just referring to the option to just override everything or
yeah.
which is very cool.
Yes, yeah. Look, I mean, it happens. Sometimes you realize this is not something that our pattern supports, but you don't want to throw the whole pattern away. It's really you just want to alter some infrastructural component. You just say, for this particular component, I'd like to take over it and ignore it, and then down the line you may decide to build it into your module.
Yeah, it's a big mistake with a lot of the tools that just overruns everything that you do, and whenever you need a minor change, just to override something, you get into a showstopper with these tools. And by providing an override, that's great. It's allowing you to do your own things on whatever location.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing that we definitely want to encourage is guys to try build their own modules. Of course, if you run into a problem, just throw us a mail, get in touch. We're happy to assist. It can be a little bit tricky sometimes, but we're working on that. We actually want to build some kind of an automation for building modules.
Okay.
Do you have a location to put in modules if people want to build modules?
Yes. So if we start seeing a community grow out of this, one of the things that we want to do is we want to build a marketplace ultimately. But if guys have modules that they want to put onto our website, they're more than welcome to send it to us, and we'll just post it up as long as it's not malicious.
Yeah, of course, you're going to check if it's malicious first.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it was very good to have you on the show. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
I think we're a bit over time anyway, but it was fun.
Time that's not very.
Do we have time for the swag of the week, or don't we have something like that?
Yeah, we just skip that and
just skip that.
A stack of gadgets is running low at this time, so this is the time. So we just throw in the end leader, and next week it's the 19th. So we have to, if we survive Friday the 13th tomorrow, then we maybe right back on the 19th again with the number 103 show, and we'll see you then next time. See you next time. Bye bye.
Cheers.
Bye.